The ruin storm had been unleashed, and with no hope of matching the traitors' forces, the Loyalist situation was now grim. Yet even with the overwhelming force of his armies, Horus still needed a tool to defeat the Emperor himself. To win against his father, he would need to achieve power akin to a god. How could a mortal man obtain such a thing? How much will be sacrificed to get it? Welcome to our series on Warhammer 40k and the Horus Heresy, explaining the origins of the Imperium and Chaos. In this 9th video, we will explore Horus's attempts to get supreme power from the Eye of Terror and Molech. And we've also got a shout out for something fans of 40k on tabletop need to get in on if they aren't already, our sponsor Infinity. Infinity is another sci-fi tabletop wargame, set in a future that is less grim-dark but just as action-packed as Warhammer's vision. It's a future where humanity is almost united, but not quite. Nations have merged into a small number of large alliances, and while they aren't at war with each other, they certainly aren't peaceful either. Competition for resources has brought these powers to a state classified as Code Infinity, the utmost verge of war, in which rival special intelligence services battle using elite teams of agents. That's where the tabletop miniatures and the multiplayer wargaming comes into play. And there's about to be a great introduction to this world in the form of Infinity Paradise Lost, an upcoming animated series in the Infinity canon. It'll be a beautifully rendered tale of action and espionage in this tense sci-fi Cold War scenario, in which the rivalries of humanity are set in contrast with the emergence of alien civilizations, believed long extinct. Basically, now's an excellent time to get in on the world of Infinity, so we'll link you to the game and the trailer for the upcoming show in the description below. At the beginning of 008M31, Fulgrim, the Primarch of the Emperor's Children, arrived at Hydra Codatus, a world that the Iron Warriors had just captured. On the planet's surface, Fulgrim met Perturabo, the Iron Warriors' Primarch, and told him about a weapon of incomparable might. This weapon, called Angel Exterminatus, came from Eldar legends, and was supposedly used in the past to imprison an Eldar god. Fulgrim also presented an Eldar guide who would show them the way to this weapon's location. Perturabo knew that Fulgrim wasn't being straight with him, for he would never reveal that information if there weren't a catch. Despite this, he decided to play along, for there was something of great value that had to be there. Thus, the main fleets of the two legions combined into one armada, comprising 300 warships in total, and set off in search of the Angel Exterminatus. The expedition ventured into the Eye of Terror, a physics-defying region of the galaxy. This place was once home to the Eldar, yet after the birth of the Chaos god Slanesh, it had become a gate of hell. The warp bled into reality, creating a warp storm outside of the Immaterium. Inside, planets changed shapes and collapsed onto themselves in a matter of minutes, yet new ones were born shortly after. Black holes that should have devoured the entire region remained static, as if their gravity did not exist. With the help of an Eldar guide, the traitors found a path through the mystic Eye of Terror. Their voyage was stopped when a sudden explosion of energy erupted from behind them. A Loyalist battleship, the Sisypheum, was following them. The survivors of Istvan V wanted to deny Angel Exterminatus to the traitors, but while experimenting with a new weapon, their ship was overloaded with energy, giving away their position. The traitors began a boarding attempt on the temporarily immobilized vessel with an attack spearheaded by mutated Space Marine prisoners. These abominations, that barely resemble humans, wanted only to kill and die. Few could resist their ferocity, yet those who did were cut down by the traitor Space Marines and Perturabo's personal robot guard. As the Loyalists were losing ground, the traitors detected an energy spike in the Sisypheum. The traitors believed the Loyalists were preparing to blow up the ship with Perturabo on it, and an immediate evacuation was ordered. Instead, the Loyalists overloaded their engines and rammed through the Emperor's Children's battleship, escaping deeper into the Eye of Terror. 10 days later, the traitors arrived at their destination, the Eldar Crone world Eidris. Once, Eidris had housed billions of Eldar, but now it was a dead planet. The army made landfall outside the ruins of an Eldar city. In the face of an unknown threat inside, a small fortress with gun batteries was raised in front of the derelict Eldari walls. Having now set up artillery support, the majority of the 100,000 Space Marines entered the Ghost City alongside both Primarchs, 4,000 tanks, and 2 Titans. They made their way through the abandoned streets, marveling at the wondrous architecture and statues of Eldar of varying sizes. Eventually, the army reached the center of the city, a giant mausoleum. The Primarchs ventured into this tomb with 1,000 Astartes each, while the rest of the expedition fortified the entrance. Soon they found themselves deep in the bowels of a labyrinth which did not obey the laws of standard geometry and would be impossible for anyone but Perturabo to navigate. After many hours, the expedition reached the end of the maze, a burial hall of the Eldar. Millions of glowing purple crystals, each one with a soul of a dead Eldar inside, were laid upon the walls, but there was no sign of any weapon. The intrusion in the mausoleum was noticed by the Chaos God Slaanesh. Back on the surface, the Emperor's children, who were followers of this Chaos God, started killing each other, their pain and sacrifice fueling the defensive mechanism of the planet. All the Eldar statues came to life and attacked the humans. In their relentless assault, every death, either Eldar or human, gave more power to Slaanesh. To fuel the carnage, the Chaos God started filling the heads of the Space Marines with their deepest desires. The commander of the artillery positions gave in to the temptations and ordered a prolonged artillery barrage on the positions in front of the mausoleum, killing thousands of Iron Warriors. Meanwhile, deep within the planet, the Primarchs were also attacked by the Eldar statues and revenants. Having only 2,000 Astartes, they had no chance of withstanding the assault. Thus, Fulgrim and a mysteriously weakened Perturabo ventured even deeper to find the Angel Exterminatus. Yet their search was for naught, for the weapon did not exist. Here, the final gambits revealed themselves. Fulgrim had lured his brother here to become the demon Primarch of Slaanesh, and intended to fuel his ascension with his brother's life. For the last few weeks, he had siphoned Perturabo's life force using a fist-sized gem called Malgatar. Fulgrim had defeated Perturabo, yet in a final act of defiance, Perturabo threw the gem into a chasm, and with it his life force that was needed for Fulgrim to ascend. Enraged, Fulgrim stabbed Perturabo, which caused infighting to break out between the traitor legions. Slaanesh was amused enough by the current events to grant Fulgrim's wish without the sacrifice of Perturabo. Instead, his apotheosis was fueled by millions of Eldar souls trapped within the purple crystals. While the transformation was happening, the Loyalists from Sisypheum arrived and destroyed the Malgatar stone, giving Perturabo his strength back. A brutal three-way combat started, which abruptly ended when Fulgrim was reborn as a snake-like demon. His first action was to teleport away all of the Emperor's children out of the Eye of Terror as the planet Idris started collapsing. The Iron Warriors had no such ability to warp away, and, stuck on the imploding planet, were sucked into a black hole, which would send them to the other end of the galaxy, to the Talon system. Seeing what had become of Fulgrim, Horus resolved to find out how useful he would be in the war effort. In 009 M31, Horus, plagued by the visions of his past, decided to attack Molech, a planet where the Emperor had managed to increase his psychic powers. The secret of this planet was guarded by 58 million Imperial troops, 50 Titans, 500 Space Marines, and roughly 2,000 Mechanicum Knights. The Mechanicum Knights were 15-meter tall mechs that focused on speed rather than durability. To contend with this massive force, the traitors brought the majority of the remaining Death Guard and Sons of Horus to bear on Molech. In total, their force consisted of 100,000 Space Marines, 3 Primarchs, Mortarion, Horus and Fulgrim, 100 Titans, and the supporting force of the traitor Imperial Army. Immediately after their arrival, the traitors won the battle in orbit and primed themselves to obliterate Molech's planetary defenses. However, wanting to gain power as his father had decades ago, Horus was careful not to destroy the Warp Gate. Instead, the wreckage from Molech's fleet was thrown into the planet's oceans, creating tsunamis that wiped out coastal cities. Horus wanted to regain memories of the past, so he recreated the landing he made with the Emperor years ago on a planetary island. Next, he was forced to make an amphibious attack on the continent. A bloody battle was waged on shore, and the Loyalists were ultimately driven back. Meanwhile, the Death Guard attacked from the eastern side of the continent. In their path stood a thick jungle, full of giant deadly beasts. Using the first Plague Marine, who went ahead of the army and decayed all living beings and plants around him, a path for the army was created. Terrified of the Plague Marine, the beasts fled, forming a stampede that barreled into the Loyalist position on the other side of the jungle, leaving them defenseless against the incoming Death Guard. Over the next few months, the traitors advanced through the Loyalist positions until both armies linked up in front of the capital of Lupercalia. At the same time, Fulgrim slowly corrupted the Knights' pilots. At first, the change was as small as removing pleasure from battles to encourage the defenders to hunt in their time off the front line, but in the end they were fully converted into cultists of Slaanesh. The final battle of Lupercalia would have lasted weeks if the corrupted knights had not destroyed the Loyalist titans, compromising the city's defences. After Molech was conquered, Horus stepped into the warp gate. From the perspective of those around him, Horus was inside for mere moments. However, when the Warmaster re-emerged, he had visibly aged. In Horus's perspective, he had spent hundreds, if not thousands of years waging war against the Chaos armies, trying to become an equal of the Chaos gods. He achieved partial success in this bizarre war, for he was granted power beyond imagination. However, this had come at the cost of his sanity and free will, for the part of his soul that defied Chaos remained locked behind the warp gate. With each passing day, Horus lost part of his mind, but the trade-off was that he now had enough power to combat the Emperor. During the campaign on Molech, the Knights Errant, Space Marines serving under the Regent of Terra, Malkador, infiltrated Horus's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit. Although many of these elite Astartes died, they managed to plant a beacon inside the ship, one that would allow for the Loyalists to attack Horus's position directly. This happened time and time again, with 3 formations attempting to slow the traitors' approach on Terra. The first were survivors of the drop site massacre, over 30 independent groups of whom attacked supply convoys and patrol ships, or like Sisypheum, tried to kill Primarchs. The second group was the White Scars exiles, most of whom had joined forces with the survivors of Istvan V. The third group were special agents under the command of Malkador, who were either Knights Errant or Imperial assassins. Their main objective was to kill Horus before he reached Terra. The success of this guerrilla campaign severely damaged the traitors' supply lines. The path from the Coronage Deeps to the front line was too long and too exposed. To address this issue, Horus decided to conquer another industrial region, the Thramas sector, which was on the other side of the Ruinstorm. In the final days of 007 M31, Horus dispatched the entirety of the Night Lord's Legion, with its Primarch Conrad Kurz at their head, to seize the Thramas sector. This force consisted of 100,000 Space Marines, 200 Titans, thousands of tanks, and just over 200 battleships. The Thramas region did not have the defences to fight against such a colossal army. The Night Lords were known for their tactics of harrowing terror. As such, the terrified defenders put up little resistance, hoping to avoid torture and retaliations on civilians. Those who fought back were flayed and sent to surrounding planets as a warning. Many of the local Mechanicum joined the traitors, further increasing the gap in strength. The only planet that remained defiant was the capital, Thramas proper. They put up 6 months of grueling defense, and when their defenses began to crumble, the Loyalists slaughtered the population of the entire world to spare them the torture of the Night Lords. In 008 M31, the Dark Angels arrived in the Thramas sector after receiving distress calls. Their force consisted of 300 warships, 70,000 Space Marines, 100 Titans, and their Primarch Lionel Johnson. Seizing the initiative while the Night Lords were dispersing around many planets, Lion swiftly struck at Galatia with an army 3 times bigger than the garrison. The Night Lords fled, abandoning the traitor Mechanicum to their death. The Dark Angels purged all the heretics with vigilance, leaving the planet completely devastated. In the next 2 months of the campaign, the Night Lords used their slave armies to delay the Dark Angels as the traitors regrouped. Hundreds of thousands of civilians and soldiers in hiding decided to break away from their traitor overlords and aided the Dark Angels. Inadvertently, this spread the Dark Angels thin, for Lion didn't want to let his new allies fight and die alone. Without momentum, the war became a grinding stalemate. In order to find a breakthrough, Conrad Kurz allied himself with 3,000 traitor White Scars, as well as the outcasts and degenerates who had hidden themselves from Imperial authority. Cannibals, heretical Mechanicum of Ulan Huda, Psychers, and other abominations joined the traitor war effort. In a sudden attack, the Loyalists were forced to cede ground. 8 planets were lost before the year ended. The Night Lords wanted to achieve a final breakthrough on the Crucible. To that end, they attacked with 12,000 Space Marines, 25 Titans, and 50,000 newly conscripted soldiers. Using their militia as meat shields, the traitors made planetfall. Meanwhile, Conrad Kurz decided against prolonged battle, instead risking the entire battle on a gambit to split the Dark Angels apart. The Loyalists began a tactical withdrawal. Believing their enemy to be in total rout, the traitors broke ranks and began a disorganized looting spree. Lion then unleashed 7 robots on Conrad Kurz, men of iron, whom he had recovered in the past and kept in stasis. This pinnacle of all human technology wasn't enough to defeat a Primarch, yet it occupied him long enough for the Dark Angels to decimate the unsuspecting Night Lords. The traitors barely managed to escape after losing 9,000 Astartes. The Dark Angels, weary of this taxing conflict, decided to parley on the planet Seguelsa. Unfortunately, these diplomatic overtures went nowhere, the talks ending with a duel of the Primarchs. In 009 M31, the traitors were finally cornered on the planet Sheol 9. Lion, making use of his Xeno device, arrived through the warp storm from an unsuspected angle. The traitor fleet tried to salvage the situation, but was ultimately unable to fight back. The Armada split apart and left the system, leaving Conrad Kurz and 25,000 Night Lords on the planet. Outnumbering the traitors 2-1, the Loyalists mercilessly slaughtered the Night Lords. Conrad Kurz, however, managed to escape, boarding the Dark Angel's flagship and hiding himself within its bowels. Following the battle, the Night Lords had lost over half their forces, and unit cohesion broke down entirely. Those who survived split into war bands to take revenge for their failures on the civilians of the galaxy. Although the Loyalists had won a crushing victory, it had still been a Pyrrhic one, for the entire Thramas sector was burned to ashes. Lion was trapped within the Ruinstorm, which proved to be impenetrable, so he decided to aid the Ultramarines, who were having trouble fighting off the World Eaters and Wordbearers marauders. How would the 3 Primarchs within the Ruinstorm proceed? Who else was trapped within the Ruinstorm? Find out in the next episode. Our series on the Warhammer 40k Horus Heresy will continue, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.